I'm going to recognize Senator Lankford for his questions. And Senator Lankford, I'm going to go vote if you'll also chair while I'm gone.
I can.
Wonderful, thank you.
Total chaos will break out as I take over the chair. And
Typical.
Typical, yeah. Pardon me, I just ran to vote and came back, so we're all multitasking here, getting a chance to come back and forth. Thanks again for being here. Chief Hurd, thank you for coming to share your story. Please tell the families, thank you as well. This was not only a sacrifice for you to be able to come tell a very difficult story that just happened a few weeks ago, but also for the families to say yes. So from my wife and I, and from our family and from all of Oklahoma, we appreciate what you're doing and how you're handling a very, very difficult issue, and for how the families are handling this, and to continue to be able to tell the story.
Thank you, sir.
Let me, you had several references in your testimony as well to methamphetamine and fentanyl. You also referenced that it is the understanding that this is dominantly coming out of Mexico. Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics has done a lot of work on this. I put some of that information into the record today as well. What are you hearing from the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and from your own sources in McAllister on the source of the drugs that are coming into Oklahoma?
The source of our drugs starts in Mexico, and it works its way across the border either as a drug product, or maybe as a precursor. That is, once it gets into Texas, typically for us, then it is converted into a drug, or made into methamphetamine, or the fentanyl is already brought in. Typically, where I live, it comes through Dallas, Texas. The cartels, the mules carry it through Texas, through Dallas, come up 69 Highway, and distribute it all, in McAllister as one place, where between Tulsa and Dallas, and that's typically where we get it from.
You've been with the department more than 2 decades.
Yes.
Have you seen an increase in the drugs coming into McAllister in the past few years?
Definitely, sir. Like I said, 20 years ago, I worked narcotics, and we worked a lot of labs. I can tell you today that methamphetamine is cheaper today than it was 20 years ago, and the only reason for that is because it's more available.
We've heard a lot in the news lately about human trafficking, labor trafficking, individuals being able to move in and out to be able to work for the cartels. Are you experiencing that anywhere in Pittsburgh County or anywhere around McAllister?
The big problem that we run into is people in these communities gather together, and like I said earlier, they don't trust the police. So they get taken advantage of by other people in that community, or not necessarily in that community, but they get taken advantage of by other people because they don't trust us. They're told that if they report a crime, the first thing we're going to do is try to deport them or arrest them for being there, and they get victimized. And we see a lot of that. We do see a lot of crime from people obviously not driving with driver's license and not being able to drive very well, and then we have accidents, and there's no insurance, and we run into a lot of that stuff, and it escalates.
Okay. You talked about a lot of the drugs are coming into the area through Dallas. How are the dealers and individuals within the community, how are they connecting with this? Is this a cartel that you're seeing a presence of, or what are the connections here?
A lot of times it is connected to the cartels, is the information that I'm getting. Will be an immigrant will start a business, start a construction company, per se. This has happened not too long in our recent past. We've caught a fellow that had his own construction company, had several people working for him, constantly going back and forth to Dallas, occasionally going back and forth to Mexico, and used people in his construction company to distribute the drugs.
Okay. Are you seeing the same thing in some of the illegal operations that are growing marijuana in the state? We have some that have a licensed facility, and then some of them are illegal, that they're actually transporting the marijuana outside the state that are there. Are you sensing a connection of individuals that are illegally trafficked into the state to be able to work in some of these operations?
In my specific community, we don't have any of the big grows. I have seen those talking to OBN. I have seen, obviously, that made the news media. I have seen, the effects of that. I have seen that happen. But in my particular community, I haven't seen that, because we have lots of dispensaries and a few small grows, but they're indoor grows and mom and pop type stuff.
Yeah. So I just want to make a couple of quick comments to be able to get on the record and to be able to remind everybody that's here as well. The comments that you're making are part of the congressional record and will be then pulled by staff and others that are researching what to do about this in the days ahead. So all of your written comments and your oral comments and questions are exceptionally helpful, not just to this panel, but as we're going through different pieces in the days ahead, trying to pull a piece of legislation together, this congressional testimony gets pulled as a part of the permanent record of what needs to be done. So I do appreciate any recommendations that any of you have. I know Mayor Nichols, in particular, you outlined in your oral testimony earlier some specific recommendations that you would say these are the things the federal government needs to do. One of those was dealing specifically with the issue of asylum. You had mentioned that individuals coming to be able to pursue asylum, we've got to get to judges faster. We need to have courts that are closer to the border. Why would that be?
Because what's really happening, thank you, Senator, what's really happening is people are being released pending a future court date, which could be 3 to 4 to 5 years down the road.
Oh, let me make it worse.
Okay.
If an individual crosses in Yuma, Arizona, as you know, because you've seen this process, as they cross the border, Border Patrol, and they go through the process with them of saying, where would you like to make your asylum claim to be able to go through that? They're told, for instance, if they selected New York City right now and said, I'm going to go to New York, they're released on their own recognizance to make it to New York however they want to, or connecting with other organizations. The next date for their first hearing, not their determination if they receive asylum, the next date available in New York City right now is in 2033, is the next available date. So they will wait 10 years before they do the first hoop. The next hoop is 8 years after that. So currently, an individual crossing in Yuma that says, I want to request asylum, will be 18 years before final determination. I hate to interrupt you, but it's worse than you think.
That's a lot worse than I think. You know, I was just told the other day, there's 660,000 people waiting across the border when Title 42 is rescinded. They will come through within a month, and when they come through, they will be tacking on time to places like New York City.
Yeah, it'll be very significant. You outlined that in 2022, 310,000 people were encountered coming across the border in the Yuma sector. Right. But I want to just reiterate with that comment, Yuma has about 100,000 people. Do I remember that correctly?
That is correct.
Yuma has a population of 100,000. In 1 year, they saw more than 300,000 people cross the border illegally there. So I want people to understand the scope of what you're dealing with as a challenge there. And I cannot imagine the challenge on city services and for all that's happening, individuals that are moved over to other places, to Tucson or wherever it may be, to be able to try to manage what's actually going on there. But it's incredibly significant. I also want to remind folks as well, I've had conversations with Secretary Mayorkas on the specific issue of individuals that are crossing the border and how much information we know about these individuals. Because remember, as you all know, they're processed usually within 24 to 36 hours at this point and then released in the country in their own recognizance. I've asked Secretary Mayorkas, how many of these individuals do we know their criminal history? And they've gone back to be able to examine and look at it, and we don't. We know if they're on the terror watch list, but we literally don't know any criminal history for any of these other individuals other than are they on our terror watch list, or do we have a criminal history in the United States for these individuals? And these are folks that are coming from literally all over the world. In many areas of the border, people that cross the border, they're literally from Eastern Europe, they're from Africa, they're from Central America, they're from South America, they're from Asia, they're from all over the world. The last time I was in Yuma, there was a significant number of folks. In fact, if I remember correctly, the particular month I was there was in January, last time I was in Yuma. There were more people that had crossed illegally that month from Uzbekistan into Yuma than there was from El Salvador. And by the way, El Salvador is closer than Uzbekistan. But there are people literally coming from all over the world here, and we have no criminal history, no background, no information on those individuals. What have you seen there in Yuma as far as the people staying longer than, let's say, 48 hours?
Generally, they do move through very, very fast, but we're seeing this year to date 112 different countries represented in the flow. So I don't remember how many countries there are in the world, but 112 is a very significant percentage of that. Thankfully, because of our nonprofit, when Border Patrol releases, they release to the nonprofit, and they help facilitate within the day moving people, most of the people, to regional airports to get on their way. With the ending of Title 42, that process is probably going to hit its capacity, and then that's when the releases to the streets of Yuma become a reality.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize another border state.